Hey, I'm Todd Easton here at Kansas State University, and today we're talking about parent share and group discussions. Both of these are two very commonly used active learning techniques. Now, parent share is fairly straightforward. You first present the class with a question, then you tell the class to discuss with their neighbors. So you're trying to create two individuals. They sit there, they discuss for a certain amount of time, and you bring the class back together and ask people what they discussed, what kind of results did they get, and things like that. Okay? Group discussions is also very similar. In a group, you divide the class into larger groups, maybe small, 4 or 5, maybe large, 10, 12, and the idea is that all the groups have a similar type of discussion. When you're in these group discussions, you can provide different topics to different groups, but the difference between parent share and group discussions is that in a group discussion, you typically assign a leader. Okay? Now, frequently the groups choose their own leader, their own person to represent the group, and you also have all the groups report back their findings. Thus, the ability to divide the topic into 4 different scenarios, and each of the different groups reports back all the different scenarios, and then the class as a cumulative total had a chance to discuss the entire topic. So here are some successful strategies to make either of these techniques effective for your classes. First and foremost is you need to focus on the question. If you ask a poor question, you're going to get a bunch of bad discussions. Some groups may figure it out, and they may have some groups are doing really well, but other groups are doing very poorly in what you desire them to spend their time doing. So focus on the question. Too narrow of a question can cause problems. Too broad of a question can also cause problems as the class goes in all sorts of different directions. Now, that may be what you want, but as you practice and as you try different questions, you can start to hone in on the type of questions that work better, and it can make it a very effective method. Okay? At this point, you need to provide some general responsibility for the students. You've given them entire control of the class. You don't want them talking about their date last night or what they plan to do on vacation. You want to make sure that they are focused in on the topic of interest to you. Okay? So, an easy way to do that is just to walk around the classroom. Don't sit at the front of the classroom, walk all the way around, try and participate in some groups. As you're walking around, stop and listen. Oh, that's an excellent comment. You're not really doing very much. You may even provide additional insight, but the idea is that you are there, you're listening, you're validating what they're saying, and that helps make sure that all the groups are actually doing something that is useful. Occasionally, you just ask a bad question, or a group started talking about something and they went off in a direction that you don't want. And in these situations, you need to refocus the class. And it's okay during this, say, all right, class, hold up. You know, I asked a bad question. It was a little bit on the vague side. I hear several groups going off toward this direction. It turns out that I want everybody to focus on this aspect of this question. And all of a sudden, it's your issue and it was a bad question from you. You don't want to say that, oh, I got 8 groups that are doing something bad. Okay? Put it as, I wasn't clear enough in my question, but here's where I want you to focus your discussions. Okay? You need to give a warning on time. It's really rude to get people in halfway through a conversation and immediately start up the class. So give them a warning. You got 30 seconds left to wrap up your conversations. Okay? And as you do this, don't wait for the classroom to be silent, because it may never ever get there. Okay? So for me, once I've done the warning, I'll wait for this time I set and said, all right, class, it's time to get started. Okay? And then I'll count to like 5 or 10, and I'll watch. And there's like this little bubble right next to me, and this bubble will slowly spread. And after it gets to a certain point, I will just start talking. And I will fill the time with nothing. Boy, I walked around, I heard a lot of really useful discussions. I was actually surprised by what some people said, and I learned some cool things. Notice I didn't say anything useful to anybody, because I realized the back corners of the classroom or some other groups are still trying to finish up their conversations. And my goal is to fill 45 seconds with topics that don't really matter, so that the entire class can hear the conversations that are important. Now, this is one of the most important parts. This is, again, putting responsibility directly on the students. Okay? I will ask a particular student. I use the cards where I just ask the front person, the next person, the next person, and the next person, what did you guys talk about? You know, do you have anything else you talked about? And those will be my first 5 questions I will ask a person in particular. Now, in some situations where this is used, you may not know everybody's name. And in that case, I'll be, let's hear an answer from up there in the top corner. And if nobody answers, I'm like, all right, well, I'm looking for rows 2 and 3. And now I'm looking right at these 2 rows over on this side here. And I'm like, all right, let's hear from the 3rd row. And now we're down to like 5 to 10 students. And at that point, I'm like, if nobody's going to volunteer, I'm going to call on a particular seat. I'm like, all right, you in the blue. Okay, what did your group talk about? And they may say, you know, I didn't actually do anything useful, but that's probably only going to happen one time in the entire class. And at that point, by the time you're doing small groups or parent share, everybody's going to talk because they know they might get called on and they know it's something that you expect them to do. Okay. Last couple things. Once you've done a few individual comments, you should extend the comments to the entire class. Say, does anybody else have anything else useful to add to this conversation? Anything else that something else didn't cover? And the idea here is that by asking a few students, a lot of the easy answers have gotten out of the way. And this helps the people who always like to raise their hand. A lot of their answers are gone. And so you get to generally avoid some of the problems of people trying to monopolize your class. And the last thing that I always do is I want to make sure I have a set of learning outcomes. And so I will emphasize everything that's necessary in the class. So I'll usually have a PowerPoint slide and I'll go through and say, oh yeah, we covered that. Oh, here's one more thing we didn't cover. Now, there are some serious benefits to using parent share or group discussions. First and foremost is that you've given your class to the students. This helps the students create ownership in the material. Notice you had them discuss the material, try and learn about the material, and you actually had them report back what they learned. And this provides them with some ownership of the material, and so they have a greater chance to actually care more about the material and learn more about it. Okay? Something I really like is that now the student who is lost has had a discussion with the person sitting next to them. It's much easier for them now to create a study group. Like, oh, I'm lost too. Maybe we should get together and study. Now the next time they turn the other way, and now you got 3 or 4, and all of a sudden there's this general congeniality among the class, and it's easier for people to get together and study and do better in the class. Fundamentally, particularly with group discussions, you can help integrate the class. You know, you get sections, you're always turning here, people tend to sit in the same spot. All of a sudden with the group discussion, you say, all right, everybody was born in January, go up here February, March, April, and you make 12 groups, and suddenly everybody has to switch who they're sitting with, and you get a chance for people to know people across the room and things like this, and it's a better chance for you to actually expand people's friend base and people they associate with. So I do like that aspect of it. I like it as a tool for non-teaching. Okay? Things like faculty meetings, alumni meetings, you know, brainstorming sessions. Let's break out into small groups. You guys solve this problem, you solve this problem, you solve this problem. Not really in a teaching scenario, but just as an idea to try and get good ideas out there and not have everybody in the entire group develop the exact same thought process. Okay? I do have some major problems with either of these methods. Okay? One of the biggest problems is, when do I reconvene the class? How much time do I give? I've got some groups that are sitting there and they could go on for another hour. I've got other groups who barely lasted 5 seconds. And so now I've got groups who are just wasting time, and I've got other groups who are being very productive. And at what point do I balance between the group that needs more instruction versus the group that could just go off on their own? And so I find that a very challenging issue. Another problem is also along the same lines. Is the discussion actually helping people understand the material better? Sometimes the answer is much better, sometimes not, and it varies between the groups, and so you have a bunch of different student learning outcomes, and you lose a lot of the general consistency that is there in a classroom where everybody's doing the exact same thing. Okay? Also, as you look at classroom dynamics, strong students tend to sit next to strong students. They're in the same groups, they're doing well, they're seeing each other in the labs, things like that, and you get a bunch of weak students sitting next to each other. But that's exactly what you don't want. Turn to your neighbor. I'm getting a D. Oh, I'm getting a D too. And suddenly their discussion isn't very productive and not helping them. In contrast, I'm getting an A. I'm getting an A too, and their discussion is fabulous. And so it's almost like you're building weakness and extra strength at the exact same time. And so that's just a general problem that happens by where people sit in the classroom and who they choose to sit next to. Okay? Along the same lines, because of this, you have no control over the content. Some people may be talking about the weekend party or something like that, and that causes issues. Now, when I stopped doing this occurred about 12 years ago. Okay? And it's this issue right here. Class time can be used to teach wrong things. I happened to be walking around, we were working on something, and somebody said they want to take a derivative. It's not that the discussion had to do that. And the person took the derivative, but it turns out they had the integral instead. And so the class wasn't about derivatives or integrals, but basically my class time had been used to convince somebody who knew exactly how to take a derivative that they were completely wrong. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't ever do that again. I don't want my class to foster things that are worse. That is, that student would have been better off never having come to my class that day than if I hadn't been in that exact moment at that exact time. Now, fortunately, I was able to clarify it by the time we came back in as a class. But I can't guarantee that I heard every single conversation. And so it's really bad if somebody who is kind of the alpha personality convinces somebody else who is correct that they're wrong. And so that's fundamentally why I don't use small group discussion or parent share in class very often. Not unless it's a topic that there isn't a right answer on. Opinion topics, things like that, those all work out fine. I really hope that you enjoyed this discussion on parent share or group discussions. If you use this technique or haven't tried it, it's worth trying. I know my feelings about it. I don't ever really do it. I like using it in meetings and things like that. That works out very as an effective tool. Anyway, please give me a thumbs up if you like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel.